Welcome to another day in Paradox. Today, I'm actually going to refer to Brene Brown's work. If you haven't heard of Brene Brown, I think it'd be great to watch her Netflix special. I think it'd be great to read all of her books. She's excellent when it comes to the subject that I want to talk about today, and that is vulnerability. Now, vulnerability is this, it's this thing none of us like, okay? We don't like feeling vulnerable. In fact, it's often a term that could be used when we feel afraid, concerned, that sort of thing. It would be the next step saying, well, those things existed because I was vulnerable. I was walking alone down a dark alley. I was putting myself out there for a presentation. Anytime I open myself up, if we're going to, again, using these sort of metaphors to understand what it is that we're thinking, feeling, and doing, when I open myself up, basically, I am showing a weakness, okay? And vulnerability is that thing that we don't like. The thing that Brene Brown's work does, more than any other specific psychologist or sociologist has done, at least in my opinion, is that it points to the paradoxical relationship between vulnerability and actual belonging. And that's really the most important thing that we can see. If we understand, Abraham Maslow has a hierarchy of needs, and it's like a little triangular pyramid if you want to understand it that way. And the hierarchy needs has belonging right in the center. Okay, we solve our biological needs so that we can actually be alive. We solve our safety and security needs, and then the next step is belonging. It is pivotal for all the other things that we can do. And the relationship between belonging and self, i.e. myself, me, quote unquote, being self-focused, self-actualization, or fully actualizing, Maslow argued that you had to belong before you could even become your true self. Now, I'm not arguing about him being super scientific, and I have already made the statement on this show, on our podcast, that this is not science like physics and math. And so I don't even, feel the need or the responsibility to do that. Think of it in that same context as metaphorical truth. I don't get to self-actualize as an individual until I find some place to belong. Some community, some engagement. Our biology drives us in that direction with the idea of family. And we're not the only species that is driven in that direction. Mammals are communal creatures. Okay. Now, again, I know we live in a day and age where the definition of family has become much more flexible and those sorts of things. And we all have understood that we find communal benefit in participating in recreational activities, in playing sports, in going to church, in engaging in community activities. Very interesting experience where I'm from. 2020 was a bad year for everyone because of COVID-19, but 2020 was especially bad for Lake Charles, Louisiana, because 6 weeks apart in August and September, 2 hurricanes passed through. And then the very beginning of 21, we had an ice storm. And recently now we had a flood. All of these things are terrible. And I understand the people that say, man, this town needs an exorcism. And some of them say, I need to get out of here because it's just, it's awful. I understand. I've had those thoughts. I've had those feelings. But I have also noticed that in times of great tragedy or great vulnerability, where houses are destroyed, where people are displaced, where food or fuel or other things is hard to come by, I see a sense of community that we don't see in other contexts. The inability for us to experience the richness of community in the absence of vulnerability is something that I think an overarching theme of Brené Brown's work. And again, I'll encourage anyone to go check that out. But it applies to what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about and how I'm approaching the subject of mental health in general, in that it's another one of the many paradoxes that in order for me to be richly a part of a community, I am going to have to first be vulnerable. If I'm doing a couples therapy session, I'm going to pay attention to where people are resisting vulnerability. Because if that resistance is present, then people are just not going to be able to have this sense of relationship and the sense of belonging. In other words, they're going to prevent themselves from being able to self-actualize in that relationship. This can happen in many contexts. Anytime trauma is present, vulnerability is seen as anxiety-provoking, too dangerous to approach. And in the sense that it's too dangerous to approach, what we're really preventing is we're preventing ever having the sense of belonging again. And in the absence of belonging, we can't self-actualize. We can't get on board with the things that we want to do to identify for ourselves, for the best version of ourselves, however we want to live our best life. All of the sort of catchphrases that are echoed throughout our culture, those things are prevented if we are unwilling or unable to be vulnerable in relationships and in community in the context in which it would be safe and obviously appropriate. And we present that to ourselves if we're willing. And this is something I'd like anybody to pay close attention to. If you catch yourself resisting vulnerability, then one, understand you're preventing belonging and self-actualization in that relationship. And two, decide why. Is that a relationship that is actually not safe? Then we need to make some choices. Like last episode, we need to make some value judgments, and we need to reprioritize our values and what we're pursuing. Or two, is there something in our history or in our psychology that prevents us from being vulnerable in some general sense? And what do I need to work on? Because without vulnerability, I can never be my truest self.